COVID-19 pandemic has been life-altering for the majority of us. People's jobs and health have been affected in many ways. One issue that has not been greatly discussed is the mental health of adults during the pandemic. Many of us were robbed of going off to college, socializing with friends, going to work, and attending family gatherings. We went from being out and about with friends to being locked down alone or with immediate family. The reason I'm giving this speech is to inform people about how the mental health of adults has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Social isolation, undiagnosed mental health issues, and grieving the death of a loved one or friend have been shown to be the leading causes of mental health issues during the pandemic. At the end of my speech, the audience will be able to understand how the mental health of adults became such an issue this past year. One huge increase in mental health issues during the pandemic is social isolation. Social isolation refers to when one has little to no social interaction with other individuals. When the President of the United States of America announced that everyone would have to go into quarantine to prevent the spread of the virus, mixed feelings were expressed. Some people thought it was the worst idea ever, while others thought that it was a safe idea. According to Healthline.com, quote, furthermore, being diagnosed in and of itself is stressful. The novel disease is potentially life-threatening, and those who get sick are asked to isolate from loved ones. Symptoms can occasionally persist for months, disrupting people's everyday lives and functioning and putting them at risk for mental health issues. End quote. Being isolated from social interactions can affect how a person functions in their daily day-to-day routine, whether it is forced isolation or isolation of choice. It is difficult regardless. Another factor that led to increased mental health issues is people being undiagnosed or having gone untreated. There are people nowadays that cannot afford to get the mental help they need because of how expensive it is, or their health insurance does not cover mental health services. If someone does not get the help that they need, their mental health can affect their life on a day-to-day basis. It can affect how they function and think. The longer that a person's mental health is left untreated, the worse it can get. When some people cannot get the help they need, they turn to self-medicating. According to UnityRehab.com, quote, it is extremely dangerous to leave a mental illness untreated or unattended. If someone with a severe mental illness is not treated with the utmost professional care, it could spell danger for both themselves and their loved ones, because mental illness is a disease that impacts the way that people feel, thinks, and acts towards others. Treatment must be prioritized, end quote. If a person's mental health is not treated correctly, it can have permanent effects on how one functions. The final factor that contributed to the decline of mental health during the pandemic is grieving the loss of a loved one or friend. Unfortunately, the pandemic brought a huge number of deaths with it. Although everyone will experience death in their lifetime, the losses during the pandemic were magnified because of all the other compounding factors. When someone loses a loved one, their mental health can suffer. According to publichealth.columbia.edu, quote, losing a loved one suddenly also raised the risk of major depression, excessive use of alcohol, and anxiety disorders, including the panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and phobias, end quote. Almost everyone can relate to this as they get older because everyone will experience it at some point in their life. One family had a hard time dealing with the loss of multiple family members after being diagnosed with COVID-19. The Fusco family lost 5 family members to the virus, while a couple others suffered side effects of the virus. Families that suffered multiple losses not only dealt with grief, but were at a higher risk of suffering from mental health issues. In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected people's mental health in many ways. Social isolation, undiagnosed mental health, and dealing with grief can have serious effects on how one is functioning through this pandemic. Even with the development of a cure to fight the virus off, it cannot bring back the lives of those who had their life taken from them. Thank you for coming to my speech.